Hey guys, and welcome to my channel, or welcome back. In today's video, I'm going to be doing another experiment. I will try to read like Namjoon from BTS for an entire month. I know that man has recommended 20 something books, so let's be realistic, I'm probably going to read 8 to 9. So if you would want a part 2, let me know in the comments. I think I would still do it this year. I don't have a set TBR, I will just keep reading until I will run out of time. Okay, let's get to it. Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka is one of those books that I always wanted to read but just couldn't find time to do so. I knew about the premise, of course, and that is that a man wakes up and he finds himself to be a giant bug. I think it's said that he is a dung beetle, and the first thing he thinks about is, I have to get to work on time. He doesn't even concern himself with being a giant beetle now. Previously, this man earned money for his entire family, and he suddenly cannot do so. The clerk from his work arrives, he gets scared, his family doesn't even think too much about his condition, they go straight into talking about money, what they're going to do. The main character's name is Gregor, by the way. They no longer need Gregor, they're scared of him, they're disgusted of him, and this is a short but very impactful story, very dark and heartbreaking. I can't believe this was written in 1915, because this could have been written in 2015 and it would still have the same impact. You can really relate the story to 21st century capitalism and being useful in the society and being productive. And I felt completely mesmerized by the story. Franz Kafka's writing is straight to the point and very descriptive at the same time. And it feels like you're really there, and I could truly feel for Gregor, and I really loved this story. By the way, Franz Kafka was born in Prague in the Czech Republic, where I'm from, so he gets bonus points for that as well. Almond by Sohn Won-pyung is a story that deals with questions such as what makes a human human-like, are emotions the only thing that makes us human, and what does it mean to be a human? Our main character has a condition called alexithymia, which means that he cannot process emotions the same way that others do. In the book, it's described as if he cannot even feel them. And in the beginning of the story, I could truly connect with him, despite the narration being very emotionless-like, which I guess is the whole point. But then there is a lot of graphic scenes that are described in the same way as, oh, I just went to the toilet, that kind of very simple writing, which again is the entire point. And I almost felt myself just disconnecting from the main character, whose name is Jiyoung, by the way, I didn't say that. And I read this as an audiobook, and I still had to force myself to continue the story. Overall, this is a very tragic and sad story that kind of has a good ending. I kind of wish that it had a different ending that would be more impactful, but regardless, I did like the story in the end. The story in itself is very different, and I would recommend it to others. Just know that there is some graphic violence in the book. And I feel like by the time I finish this video, I will need you guys to pay for my therapy, because so far the books are very sad and depressing and traumatic. So I'm hoping for a light read, but I don't think that's gonna happen. The Unbearable Lightness of Being by Milan Kundera is one of those books that I should have read in high school, but I'm glad I didn't, because I don't think that I would fully understand it. And to be honest, I'm not exactly sure if I even understand it now. We follow 4 characters. 2 of them are a married couple where the husband is constantly cheating, and then we follow his mistress that gets together with another guy later on. And the main theme of this book is How light or how heavy should we live? And it's clear that there is no real answer to it. And by light or heavy is determined if we should be burdened by the presence of others in our lives and how much we should keep people around. It is definitely an interesting concept. There was some philosophy sprinkled in it, but overall it's a very dark and melancholic book, and I didn't enjoy reading it at all because I just found all of the characters so unlikable. There wasn't a single character that I would like, that I could connect to, which I guess is the point. But I really didn't enjoy the vivid descriptions of cheating. Quite fairly, it made me very angry and I didn't want to continue. So if it wasn't for this video, I don't think that I would continue with it. Overall, I'm glad I got through it because it has some very interesting concepts. I can see myself being influenced by some of the philosophy in it later on. I thought that this story would be about a cute dog, and I was cheated, just like the wife of the main character. To be fair, there is a cute dog in the story. That didn't make up for the anger and frustration that I felt reading it. And I do have really mixed feelings in general. On one hand, I did like it. I thought that the concept was interesting, the idea were interesting, the writing was good, but the contents of the book are dreadful. I didn't even mention that this takes place in Czechoslovakia during the Russian occupation that happened in 1986 up until 1989, roughly around that time. And the writer Milan Kundera himself emigrated from Czechoslovakia in the 70s, I think. So I guess he was speaking from some experience. Overall, it's an interesting book regardless, and I don't want this review to be too harsh. There were just stuff that I liked and stuff that I didn't like. Human X by Kang might be one of the best books I've read in a while, if not ever. It's about the Gwangju massacre that took place in South Korea in 1980, and this book is inspired by real events and real experiences of the people involved in it. We follow 6 POVs of 6 characters that were somehow involved in it. One of them is a boy that doesn't really understand the depth of what is going on, or for example, one of them is a woman that is very much involved within the political events of the country and she understands what's going on. And the 7th POV is of the author herself that tells you about the real story behind this book and what made her inspired to write it. It's obviously very tragic. I've cried multiple times as I was reading the book. The book in itself deals with the theme of being evil within humanity and what does it truly mean to be evil. And it's such a well-written book. Trust me, go read it. I think this will be my favorite book of this reading challenge, and I'm pretty sure that it will make my best books of 2022 video for sure as well. I do have the Czech edition, by the way, with a different cover and a different title, but I don't think that really matters. The Stranger by Albert Camus is one of those books that can be interpreted in 100 different ways. It is about a man that doesn't really react much to his surroundings emotionally. In a way, he's very tolerating to others, but at the same time, he comes off as having no morals at all. And then he gets into a situation where he kills an Arab man, and then of course he's being prosecuted for it. Like I said, you could interpret this book in 100 different ways. What I took from it is that it is a human nature to give meaning to everything, and sometimes the events in life just happen without any meaning at all, but we still are enforcing a certain meaning to the events, or at least that's the kind of person that I am, because in a way it makes me feel better, it makes me feel safer, and the main character is quite the opposite. The Stranger is truly an interesting philosophical book, and I would recommend it to others. Just know that there are certain dark topics discussed in this book. By the way, I wanted to show you the Czech edition because I don't think I've seen this cover in any other edition. And look at the beach and the sun and the flat. I think it's so beautiful and it corresponds to the events of the book well. The Stranger is definitely worth reading. Nature by Ralph Waldo Emerson is one of the most difficult but also relaxing books I've read this month. The writing is very flowery, there's a metaphor in every other sentence, it's philosophical, it talks about the relationship of humanity to nature. I've had a hard time understanding every sentence, and at first I thought that it was because English is my second language, but I feel like that even a native speaker would sometimes have troubles discerning the meaning. I ended up enjoying it. This is an American classic, and I don't think that I would have discovered it otherwise if it wasn't for this video. I especially like this part when he talked about the language and nature and how we take the meanings from nature to use for our descriptions. If you're in the mood for something philosophical and you want something that's a bit more difficult to read, Nature is perfect for you. Kim Jiyoung, born 1982 by Cho Namjoo, is one of the most relatable books I've ever read in my entire life. At first I thought that I will not be able to relate to it because I didn't grow up in South Korea, but I guess some experiences are universal. Kim Jiyoung is a very common name in South Korea, and so the story could really happen to anyone. The book is based on a lot of statistics and at the same time personal experiences of the author. Sometimes the statistics took me out of the story, but I totally understand why they were there. I really enjoyed this book. Sometimes it was a little scary just how much I could have relate to the main character, and I think this book captures well just the usual life of a woman on a day-to-day basis. I really loved this scene when Kim Jiyoung is harassed all throughout the evening by a male business associate or a business partner, really terribly sexually harassed to be exact. And then the business partner gets up because he's worried for his own daughter and how she will get home. Of course, he wouldn't want other men to do this to his daughter, but if the woman isn't related to him or close to him, he just doesn't care. And it's like he completely dissociates himself from the situation. And I think that captured the hypocrisy of these people really well. In the beginning of the book, Kim Jiyoung starts to act really unusually because other women in her life are speaking through her, and I really wish that was explored more because it would have been really interesting. But I still loved this book and I would highly recommend it. Norwegian Wood by Haruki Murakami is a book that I have a lot of mixed feelings about. The book follows Toru Watanabe, whose best friend passed away tragically, and Toru is trying to move on with his life, deal with the grief, and in the process of it, he gets close to the former girlfriend of his best friend, Naoko. This book is talking about mental health and depression and treatment for it and suicide, and I can imagine that at the time that this was published, it was pretty revolutionary. But like I said, I do have a lot of mixed feelings about it, so let's start with the positives first. I really liked how the grief was portrayed in this book, and how Toru was moving on from the loss of his friend was very realistic and well written, and how he suddenly remembered years later his friend in like a random activity, and I love that. Now let's move on to the negatives, and if Norwegian Wood is your favorite book, I would probably stop this video now, or you can skip ahead to when I talk about 1Q84. A lot of characters in this book, particularly male characters, feel very real and are well developed. But there's this character that I just cannot stand, and it's the character of Midori. Her character feels like a joke. She talks like an actress in an adult movie with horrendous script. At some point I started playing a game if her dialogues could fit into such a movie, and 90% of her dialogue really could. She doesn't feel like a real person. She feels like a badly written fantasy. Like, if it wasn't for this character, I would enjoy this book much more. I physically cringed and rolled my eyes every time there was a scene with her, particularly from like page 200 and onwards. It was so bad. To be fair, other female characters also had moments like that, but it was just super bad with Midori. So there's one thing. The next thing is that this book has a lot of sex scenes, and I'm totally all for it if it serves some kind of purpose in the story. And I would say 90% of the sex scenes actually do serve a purpose in the story, but the ones that don't serve a purpose just completely ruined the story for me. Especially this one scene towards the end. I'm still so mad about that. It was so unnecessary. And last but not least, there is a very, very questionable lesbian sex scene with a 13-year-old girl. I've got nothing to say to that. Just wow. And I know that this book is so popular and it's a favorite of many people. I know this shot Murakami to his superstar fame, and I'm like, why? I don't know. There are parts of it that I really liked, but the parts that I hated are the most prominent to me in this case. 1Q84 by Haruki Murakami is my final book in my reading challenge. I was only able to read 400 something pages, so I finished book 1 and I started reading book 2. I have some thoughts already. We have two POVs, Aomame, who is an assassin, and in the first chapter she climbs through this ladder and suddenly the world around her feels a little different. There are two moons in the sky, and so she names this year that she's in 1Q84. Then we have the perspective of Tengo, who is a writer and a math cram teacher, and he is supposed to rewrite the story of a 17-year-old girl, Fukaeri, so that the story could win a literary prize. It's exploring the themes of cults, religion, and that sounds right up my alley. I didn't finish the book yet, but I can already tell that this cult in particular is very twisted and it deals with some sexual abuse. Let me start this off by saying that so far I really like the book. It didn't make me as angry as Norwegian would, for example, yet. We'll see about that. I enjoyed the writing as well. Sure, there were some WTF moments, but I liked it. There's only one thing that I really don't like, and that's the sexualization of Fukaeri, who has written this story that one of the main characters, Tengo, is supposed to rewrite. She is 17 and her and Tengo start to form this sexual bond. And by the way, Tengo is supposed to be 30 something, 35. She's only 17 and it just makes me so uncomfortable, especially starting from page 300 something, I would say. If there's a Tengo's POV, you just know that there will be some really creepy shit said about Fukaeri. So on one hand, you have this sexually abusive cult that's exploiting minors, and then I actually have a mark here. Within 2 pages, you have Tengo, the main 30-year-old character, who is basically lusting after a minor, and that is seen as okay. And I spoiled myself, so I know what happens within the relationship already. And those two things just clash together completely. I don't know if this was the intention of Murakami, if he actually realized what he was doing here, but because of that, the whole story just feels off. I will still continue the book, but I just wish that the Tengo's POV would just not exist, especially in the second book onward. I just wish we would have a better male main character, one that wouldn't be so creepy. Now that my reading experiment is finished, here are my final thoughts. I'm glad that I did this experiment. It was so out of my comfort zone. I finally got around to reading books that I wanted to read for such a long time, but I just didn't pick them up. I still feel like I will need therapy after this video, so please like this video. If you can. My favorite book I've read was Human X by Kang. My least favorite book was actually, surprisingly maybe, Norwegian Wood by Haruki Murakami. Here are the final rating of all the books that I have read this month. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!